All right, another deep dive. Let's jump right in. Today, it's all about the future of agriculture. And wow, did you send over some fascinating research for this one? Seriously, some really cool stuff.
Yeah, it is a really interesting topic for sure.
So we're going to cover a few big themes that I pulled out from all this research, right? We've got diversification, which is always a big one,
Mm.
reducing food waste, which always blows my mind how much we waste, and then the role of women in the industry, which is so important and sometimes I think gets overlooked.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
seems like you've been doing a lot of reading on all of this lately.
Yep.
What was it that really piqued your interest in all of this research?
Well, I think, it's that these sources are really trying to push the boundaries of how we think about agriculture. We're so used to just thinking about it as like, how do we produce more food?
Yeah.
But these articles and studies, they're really challenging that
Mhm.
and looking at how do we produce it smarter and how do we make sure that it benefits everyone involved, from the farmers to the consumers to the environment. It's a whole systems approach.
I completely agree. And I know I was totally fascinated by the whole concept of diversification in agriculture.
Yeah.
One of the articles that you sent me, it profiled this farmer in India who totally revolutionized his entire farming operation.
Yeah.
And he used to just grow rice, you know, that was his thing.
Right.
But then he kept running into these crop failures, because the monsoons were becoming less and less predictable. So he decided to branch out, right? Diversify. And he started growing all these different fruits and vegetables.
Mm.
He even started raising poultry. And now his farm is thriving. It's incredible.
That's great.
It's just such a good example of how diversification isn't just about like managing risk, but it's about creating this whole web.
A more holistic and resilient system.
Exactly. And when farmers have this diverse range of products, they're not as vulnerable when prices drop,
Yeah.
for any single commodity. And plus it opens up all these new markets for them. They can start selling directly to consumers at farmers markets or, even online. The possibilities are kind of endless.
It is a really interesting way to think about it, too. Instead of being kind of at the mercy of these huge, agricultural corporations or whatever it might be, you're giving yourself a little bit more power and control over your own destiny as a farmer.
Yeah, exactly. And that actually leads us perfectly into our next topic, which is food waste.
Oh, yeah.
And, this is something I'm always shocked by. One of the studies you sent me, it said that something like a third
Wow.
of all the food that we produce globally
Crazy.
gets wasted.
Oh.
It
Oh.
just seems so backwards,
Mhm.
We're putting all this effort into growing this food, and then we're just tossing a huge chunk of it in the trash.
Mhm.
And it makes you wonder, what are we doing?
Yeah, and it's not just that it's, wasteful in terms of the food itself, but it's wasteful in terms of all the resources that went into producing that food, right?
Oh, absolutely.
The water, the land, the energy, the labor. I mean, all of that is just wasted if that food ends up in a landfill.
Yeah. And think about all the emissions that are generated from producing all that food.
Exactly. And then it ends up in a landfill producing, methane, which is an even more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So it's just a really, really bad cycle.
Yeah, it really is. So what can we actually do about it? Are there ways to reduce waste on the farm itself, right at the source?
For sure. There are a lot of cool things happening in that area. I know one of the articles you sent me talked about how some farmers are using sensors in their fields
Oh, wow.
to monitor soil moisture levels and nutrient levels so
Interesting.
they can apply just the right amount of water and fertilizer, at the right time. So that really cuts down on waste and it makes the whole operation a lot more efficient.
So I guess technology has a role to play too in
Uh-huh.
creating a more sustainable food system.
For sure. Big time. I mean, there are all sorts of technologies that are being developed to help us, reduce waste, improve efficiency, all of that. So it's definitely a really exciting area to watch.
But it's not just about the technology, right? It's also about the people and how we think about food. And I think, this is where the role of women in agriculture becomes really crucial.
I completely agree with you. One thing that really struck me from these sources you sent over was how much they emphasize this idea that empowering women in agriculture isn't just about social justice.
Right.
It's actually essential if we want to deal with these big challenges like food waste and food security.
Exactly. And one of the reports that you sent, it highlighted this case study from Kenya, I think it was, where this group of women farmers, they formed a cooperative and they were able to access all these microloans and training programs and things.
Oh, that's great.
And it was amazing because they learned all these techniques for post-harvest handling and storage of food, which dramatically reduced their food waste and increased their profits. And it wasn't just about the techniques themselves, you know?
Right.
It was about giving these women the tools, the resources that they needed to really take control of their own
And make
livelihoods.
their own choice.
Exactly. And when women have equal access to resources, land ownership, and decision-making power, I mean, it's just a win-win for everyone. Their families benefit, their communities benefit, and the entire food system benefits. And I think that's really, really powerful.
It's kind of like that diversification idea, but applied to people instead of crops, right?
Yeah.
You're diversifying the decision makers and the stakeholders involved.
That's a really great way to put it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a perfect note to kind of wrap up this deep dive on, you know. It's so clear that the future of agriculture is about so much more than just, squeezing every last drop out of the land.
Yeah.
It's about being smart, being sustainable,
Uh-huh.
and ensuring that everyone has a seat at the table.
It's really fascinating to see all these different approaches and innovations that are happening in the world of agriculture right now. And it definitely leaves me with a lot to think about. Like, what are the biggest roadblocks standing in the way of these changes? Are we investing enough in research and development for sustainable farming practices? Are governments and organizations providing the right support to smallholder farmers? And especially to women farmers who often face even more challenges. These are the big questions, I think.
Yeah, these are really big questions. And I think these are questions that all of us need to be asking ourselves if we truly want to create a food system that works for everyone, right? And not just for a select few.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a great thought to leave our listener with. We all have a part to play in creating a more sustainable and just food system. And it doesn't have to be these huge grand gestures. Even small actions like, being mindful of our own food waste at home
Yeah.
or supporting local farmers markets, those can make a real difference.
Cool.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It was really fascinating.
I had a great time.
Me too.
Yeah.
And until next time, happy eating, everyone.
Yeah. Eat well.